Hi, today we're going to talk a little more about international trade, but the focus of today's lecture will be specifically on job outsourcing. If you happen to live or be from one of the developed countries like the United States or Canada or the European Union somewhere, people in those countries are probably very concerned with job outsourcing, with jobs going to other countries, usually developed countries like China or Mexico or whatever is the poor country in your vicinity. The problem is that even though the job outsourcing topic has dominated the political agenda for many years now, many people don't really have much information about what it is, how it works, who wins and who loses in the process. So they have very strong opinions about it, but at the same time, very limited knowledge, very limited understanding of the topic. And that's what we're going to talk about today. When I teach this course in the classroom, I start with an exercise that I encourage you to do here along with me as I will explain how it goes. I start with these 3 questions. And I ask them in the context of the United States, but if you happen to be from a different country, especially from a different developed country, chances are the answers that you will provide and the correct answers to these questions will be very similar to what I get in my American classroom. So I would start the class with asking my students, first, what fraction of the U.S. consumer spending should go to goods labeled made in the United States? So basically, Americans shop around, earn some money and then spend that money. And some of that money is spent on products made in the United States, and some of that is spent on products made outside the United States. So the first question is, if you were omnipotent, if you were God, or if you were, the king of the world, and you could do whatever you can, for your country, the United States, or if you happen to be from a different country than for your different country, how much of the money that people spend on all kinds of things, food, clothing, housing, transportation, whatever else we spend money on, what percent of that money should be on the products and services made domestically, made in the country that you are from, be spent, right? So for every dollar, how many cents should be for stuff made or offered domestically? Then the next question is, what portion of the money should go to products made not in the United States or outside your country? So basically two are kind of, complementary. So if you believe that, let's say, 50 cents should be spent on domestic products and 50 on foreign-made products, then obviously it's the same for the second question, just in reverse, right? Then finally, and again in the United States, the biggest concern seems to be China in the last 10-15 years. So I would ask, all right, so and for every dollar you spend, what percentage of that dollar, how many cents of that dollar should go for products that are specifically labeled made in China? All right? What would be the perfect scenario? What would be the best outcome for the United States? Now, clearly, nobody thinks that Americans should spend all the money on products made in America. People believe that, well, at least some of it should be probably spent on foreign-made goods. Normally, what I get, people say, well, I believe that about maybe 30-40% of the products should be spent on American products, and maybe, another 60 or so percent should be spent on foreign-made goods. They usually tend to believe that, yes, it's okay to spend more on foreign-made goods, but they're kind of comfortable with something closer to the middle, right? So something in that area. Now, then I ask people if they know how it is, how much is spent on American-made products and how much is spent on foreign-made products and how much is actually spent on products specifically from China. Again, I encourage you to take a pause here and write down your answer. Write down how much you think Americans spend on American products or services, on non-American products or services, and of those, how much is spent specifically on Chinese-made products, or do it for your country. Again, here I get numbers that are like this. People believe that they spend about 80 to 90% on foreign products, only about 10% on American products, and of those, probably about 70% goes to China. That's the answers. So they believe that they spend almost all of the money on foreign-made products, up to, I don't know, 80-90%. About 70% of that goes to China, and only about 10 to 20% is spent on American products. And they believe it's not fair. The number should be more like 50-50. Now, the truth is, and this is bothering me a lot, I mean, the truth is that it's not even close to truth, what people think it is. So in reality, Americans spend almost 88.5% of all the money that they earn on American-based products and services. Almost all food in America is American. Housing, obviously, your house, your mortgage, your bills, electricity, all that stuff, your rent, if you're renting, is an American product and you pay for it. Transportation, most of the cars sold in the United States are actually made in the United States. All kinds of things. I mean, the only things that we really import, that's, I don't know, clothing maybe some, plastic goods, maybe some electronics, things like that. But I mean, how often do you buy that? I mean, maybe once every few years a TV, maybe once or a year a cell phone, I don't know, some clothing, from time to time. It's incomparable, it's very small compared to what you spend total in the United States. Now, so by reverse, about 11.5% of what you spend goes overseas. Now, of that, only 2.7% of American spending is for the products that are labeled made in China. But only 1.9 cents of that dollar actually goes to China. Because when you buy a Chinese product, like for example this mouse here, made in China, part of the value that you pay, let's say it's $20, at least 5 of that would be dollars, of that would be the salary of the retail worker, the guy at the store who sold it to you. Part of that would be marketing, advertising, accounting, stuff that needed to be done in order to place this mouse on your shelf. So in reality, only 1.9 cents out of all the money that Americans spend go to China. So people who see China as a reason or cause for American economic difficulties, they're just plain wrong. I mean, yes, some jobs probably were outsourced to China. Yes, probably some products are coming from China. But even if China disappeared tomorrow, in terms of the spendings, it's not going to automatically create jobs in the United States. As said, I mean, not such a huge portion of the money that we spend actually goes to China. Yes, I mean, those products are very visible because, you go to a store and most of the stuff that you see in the stores, little products that you buy are, made in China. But again, there is much more to what we, pay for, what we generate, the jobs. I mean, as I said, gas, food, industrial equipment, buildings, housing, transportation, I mean, just about anything, services, obviously, banking, insurance, medical, all that stuff is local and all that stuff is people working. So yes, China may be a slight little thing that we need to, worry about, stealing jobs. But if China, as I said, disappeared tomorrow, unemployment in the United States probably wouldn't change overnight, not noticeably. Yes, maybe more jobs a little, but it's not, it's not the cause, and it's definitely not a solution. Many politicians are prompt to, accuse job outsourcing and foreign trade in, lost American jobs and high unemployment. And many not only see that as a cause, but also believe that that's the way we should fix it. Impose import tariffs on imports so that fewer of those come to the United States and more jobs are created here. But again, as I said, I mean, it's not going to completely or solve the problems at all. And we'll talk some more about why that may not be a good idea. Now, some reasonable questions for today's lecture. So what are the benefits of outsourcing jobs overseas? What are the downsides sides of outsourcing jobs overseas? Who benefits and who loses? And where? Where are the winners or losers? Is it in your country, in the country where the jobs went to? So how does it work? Now, when we talk about job outsourcing, we basically have 2 points of view here. On the one hand, people say, oh, job outsourcing is bad because anything made in, let's say, China, I'm going to use China here, but it's very stereotypical, and obviously there is, China is just, a country that we love to point at, but, really we are buying products from all around the world, no matter where you are, where you live. So, but anyway, people see made in China, for example, as made in not here, and so they see job outsourcing or imports as lost jobs, because they think if the product didn't come from there, it would be made here, so people would be employed, unemployment would be lower, the economy would be stronger. Now, the opposite to that is the belief that outsourcing actually is good. Somebody put some thinking in it, somebody did some calculations and found the best way to make a product for less. And if that best way involves outsourcing, so be it, because that makes products cheaper, more attainable to people, so people can buy more and have a better life. But more important, when they buy this product overseas, for example, a cell phone. Do I have my cell phone here? Yes. So when people buy a cell phone overseas, or if it's made overseas and sold here in the United States, it costs virtually nothing. I think I might have gotten this one for free from my mobile provider. Actually, this one is not for free because it's a prepaid, but it cost only a few dollars. If it was made in the United States, I would probably pay an extra $200, maybe even more. Now, that's the $200 that I saved because this product was made in China. And actually, funny, this one is actually made in the United States. It's proudly made in the United States, but doesn't matter. Imagine that it's an iPhone. iPhones are made in China. And so if they were made in the United States, they would cost about $200 more. And that's $200 that Americans now don't have, because if it's made in the United States, it costs more. Now, by buying it from China, they have that extra $200. They spend it on other products. They create demand for other products. The demand for other products creates jobs in those industries. So in many cases, by saving here, you can spend more there. And by saving here, yes, maybe some jobs disappear because here, this stuff is made overseas. But more jobs are created here because now you have more money to spend on that other stuff. I don't know, get a haircut, get some other stuff made in the United States. Maybe buy a car, maybe remodel your house, whatever else you can spend your money on. Now, the problem is that when we talk about job outsourcing, this is normally how it's presented to us.
The truth about Dick DeVos in China? September 6th. Finally, Dick DeVos admitted he cut Michigan jobs and created jobs in China. Fact, as president of Amway, he laid off nearly 1,400 Michigan workers. Fact, he invested $200 million in China. Fact, he built a factory there and created thousands of jobs for China. Is that what Michigan needs? Dick DeVos, the more you know, the worse it gets.
So you see the tone of this advertisement. Ooh, spooky, jobs went to China. Dick DeVos is an evil guy because he had outsourced job or made an investment in China. Possibly, there is some merit to this claim, but here is a different story, and you wouldn't see this one on TV. And so this is what it would look like.
Thanks. Hello?
I'm buying a freaking American Eagle from a company that's supposed to be in America, and I get India.
I understand that you're upset, sir.
No, you don't. You don't understand. Last month, I lost my job at the plant where I worked for 22 years because the whole operation moved to Mexico. My brother had to leave town because of no job.
I know how you feel, sir.
No, you don't. You have a job.
Sir, please don't hang up. I have a solution for you.
What?
See, we understand that many Americans are upset about outsourcing, so we have located American-made versions of all our products. If you have a pen, I will give you the website of an American company that makes an eagle statue very similar to ours, same size, same materials, only theirs is made 100% in America.
Well, thanks. I appreciate it, but is the price about the same?
No, sir, theirs is $212 more. Sir?
Yeah, all right. Some of yours.
Thank you, sir. May I have your credit card number?
So I guess you got the point, right? So apparently the same sort of activity, and people are very angry about it. But once you give them the numbers, they all of a sudden sometimes change their opinion. Now, here is another experiment that I run in my class. We recognize that people are not generally against international trade per se. They tend to be concerned about trade with countries that have cheaper labor, and they feel that it's unfair to outsource or to compete with them or to let them outsource or steal your jobs because their labor cost is so much lower. So people are concerned with those countries that have cheap labor, but not with those that are not cheap. Like nobody seems to complain about imports from Japan or from Germany or from the United States or Canada. People are complaining about imports from China or from India or from, I don't know, Ukraine or Poland, right? Now, here is the experiment that I run. Imagine this. If you've seen the movie called Shallow Hal, you may recognize this guy. It's Tony Robbins, and it doesn't matter who he is, but in the movie he plays a magician, I guess, or a guy who hypnotizes Shallow Hal into seeing the inner beauty of the women. And it doesn't matter really in the context of this experiment, just so you know who he is. So now imagine that Tanya Robbins looks at America and sees that unemployment is still relatively high and the economy is not doing so well. And he thinks, well, how can I help Americans? Now, he recognizes that Americans like and love Apple products, Mac, computers, iPods, iPads. And he thinks, well, those things help Americans, to be productive or to have good time, being entertained. Why not? Maybe I would go to Foxconn, the factory that makes Apple products, the biggest factory in the world. And maybe I'll do my magic and I will hypnotize those Chinese workers in loving America. And maybe they will be willing to offer those products for less to Americans. And so he goes to China, again, purely hypothetically, just for the experiment. He does his magic, and voila, the million Chinese workers fall in love with America so much that now they send their computers, Apple products to America for free. Now the question is it good or bad? And again, I don't know about you, but my students say, yeah, it's good. I mean, I would like to get a free Mac. I would like to get a free iPad or Apple iPhone 6s. There is always one or two students who say, no, that would be bad. That would make us lazy. But most say, yeah, I mean, those things make our life better. They will allow us to save money, maybe spend that money on something else. Sure, yes, that would be a good thing. And then I say, well, imagine that over time that hypnosis kind of fades out, and now the Chinese workers want to charge 1 cent per device. So now the iPad costs you 1 cent. Would that still be good? And people say, yeah, sure, 1 cent is still good. I mean, I would gladly pay 1 cent for an iPod or iPhone. What about over time, they start charging 10 cents per device? Is that still good? How about $1? How about $10? How about $100? How about $1,000? Now, as I increase this price, at around about $500 or so, people start, yeah, I don't know, maybe now it's a little too much. So students start having, concerns. And once it reaches about $1,000, they say, no, that would be bad for America. We don't want those expensive things now. That's definitely bad for America. Now, what's important about this exercise is that it basically shows the unfoundedness, I guess, or absurdity of the claims that cheap labor countries are a threat to America or whatever country you come from. In this experiment, as you see, when I was talking about free imports, people were, yeah, that's good. If I was talking about cheap imports, people were, yeah, it's good. But only when the price went up, that's when they said, no, it's economically bad for America. And that's the thing. Here I wasn't talking about imports. I was talking about basically gifts or stuff just coming from the United States due to some sort of a hypnosis. So once you remove that emotional component, once you remove that emotional word outsourcing or imports, people are happy. People look at the numbers, they do economic analysis, and they say, yeah, it's good, or no, it's bad. But when you talk about job outsourcing, The thinking goes from here to here, and people stop thinking and start feeling. And when they start feeling, sometimes they make mistakes. Sorry guys, but that's how it works. Now, is outsourcing really bad? I'll give you another example that bothers me for many years now, and it kind of shows you how not simple, how not black and white these things are. It's the opposite to the previous example. Back in, must have been 2003 or so, when I was still a student in Dallas, there was a very interesting story that made headlines for a brief time all around the United States. The story was about a guy who worked in San Francisco in the Silicon Valley as an IT person, programmer. And he was filing his taxes, like at the end of the year, Americans file taxes. So he was filing his taxes, and the IRS randomly chose him for audit, and they noticed that there was something wrong with him. They noticed that the guy was claiming that he had 7 jobs or 8 jobs, and he made last year $750,000 working full-time for 8 different companies. He paid his taxes, everything is fine, but it just didn't make mathematical sense. How can you have 8 full-time jobs? And so somehow that information became known and that became a big scandal. And turns out this is what happened. An IT employee in the United States makes about $100,000 per year. An employee who does exactly the same job in India makes about $15,000 a year. Now, what this person was doing was basically job outsourcing. Many programmers in the Silicon Valley wouldn't actually be going to office physically and wouldn't be meeting with their boss. So the job that they do would be sent to them by email or shared Dropbox folder or whatever they use. People would work on the task and then send the work back to the company and get paid. Now, that's what normal people do. What this guy did was every time he receives a new task, he simply forwarded it to a guy in India, and he had like 10 people working for him in India. They would do his job, send back to him, and he would submit as his own. He would check the quality and, it would be fine. But basically, he was just outsourcing his job to somebody else. And by doing so, he was able to keep 7 or 8 full-time jobs. He paid the taxes, everything was fine, but you see the problem with this approach. Now, if you were the manager of a person like that, and if you discover that that's what's happening, you're paying a guy $100,000, but he really just outsourced the job to someone in India, pays $15,000 to that person, would you fire him? Would you keep him? Well, most people say, no, that's not fair, that's cheating. You gotta fire him. But think about it from the perspective of job outsourcing. Technically, the guy is a hero, if you believe that job outsourcing is bad. Because what he did, he kept 7 fully paid, gainful employment positions in the United States. The salary still stayed in the United States, he just outsourced part of it. The rest was here. So, if anything, he preserved 7 American jobs. The companies could have outsourced them directly, and here they kept, one guy, but, paid 7 times. So you understand the logic here. And when you look at that, you say, no, that doesn't make sense. This is absurd. And it is. But that's what people seem to believe when they claim that jobs should stay in America even if they cost so much more to be in America, or whatever, country you come from. So you understand that it just doesn't make economic sense. If somebody can do it cheaper, let's say a guy in China or India, why would you want to keep it in your country? Outsource it to where it's cheaper, because otherwise you will be basically paying more for less. Why would you want to do that? So tough world. Give it some thought, and I have a few more stories here if you want to click on the link and read them. So interesting stuff. Now, many people believe that high unemployment, particularly in the United States, is due to job outsourcing, or basically imports, because job outsourcing, after all, is imports. Somebody makes it over there instead of over here, and the products comes back. Again, not true. Not true at all. If you look at unemployment rate, the unemployment rate in the United States over time, it virtually hasn't changed for a long, long time. It's been always 5 to 8%, sometimes slightly higher, sometimes slightly lower, but the last 100 years or so, it really hasn't changed much. So sometimes a little up, a little down, but really within that level. Imports, on the other hand, have been dramatically increasing over time. And so if 100 years ago they were a tiny fraction of the products we consume, today they are a substantial fraction of the products we consume. If you know anything about statistics, you would know that there is no correlation whatsoever. In fact, if you look at 2008 or so, when unemployment in the United States went from about 5% to about 8%, imports actually went down. So if anything, you can claim, and obviously it wouldn't make sense, but you can claim that imports create jobs, not kill jobs. And again, the reason for both was that there was a recession, so Americans were out of jobs and were buying less from overseas. But again, there is no causal relationship. You cannot say that one causes the other. There is no mathematical correlation. Another thing is that, yes, many people in the United States or whatever country you are in, Lithuania, Ukraine, Germany, whatever it is, people lose jobs, right? So, but if you look at why they lose jobs, you will see that only about 0.1% of the people who lost their jobs, losing the jobs because it's literally outsourced to Mexico or, I don't know, Poland or Ukraine or wherever, China. 99.9% of the time people lose jobs because they didn't perform well, or because the company was not profitable, or because the management made wrong decisions, or whatever other reasons are for laying off employees. And only about 1% of the jobs literally eliminated, not just replaced with someone else, but literally eliminated, are jobs that go overseas. Most just, companies just didn't survive. I mean, bad management. So it's not like they go overseas. They just, vanish to exist. Stop to exist. So again, if you were able to eliminate outsourcing, it wouldn't really have a major impact on unemployment. I mean, those are literally uncorrelated. Now, here is a question that I will likely ask you on the exam. Take a minute and take a look and see if you know the answer. And the correct answer is E. The correlation between imports and unemployment is effectively 0. Now, a very important issue that many people fail to recognize when they talk about outsourcing is what constitutes your country. Again, America, if you're from in the United States, or if you come from a different country, it would be a different country. When we talk about international trade, somehow people are fanatically preoccupied or concerned about blue-collar workers, about basically manual labor. But in reality, there is more to America than just people who work at factories. America is engineers, America is marketing specialists, America is entrepreneurs, America is managers, America is all kinds of white-collar workers. America is much more than just factory workers. In fact, factory workers constitute a fairly small percentage of all employees today. So by being so protective of the jobs that are now primarily outsourced to China, like factory workers, factory jobs, you're kind of protecting one, and important, no doubt, it's an important part of America, factory workers, but at the expense of everybody else. Because when this stuff is made in America, that's more money for the entrepreneurs who designed and decided to make this product, for people who sell the product, for people who design it from the engineering point of view, people who design it from the design point of view, people who promote it, accountants, all those other people. And their jobs not only are not outsourced, but in many cases, the more is made overseas for less, the more of that stuff can be sold. So the more work they have. So what many people do is literally they're trying to protect a small, important but small segment of Americans at the expense of everybody else, not to mention the consumers, so including those same workers. So tricky world, keep that in mind. Now, another thing is, and again, I'm going to use the American example here, but you can probably think of something like that for just about any country. Definitely for Canada, definitely for all European countries, and probably more. For example, Apple, right? Apple computers. As you probably know, Apple is probably one of the baddest, one of the worst outsourcers there is. So they make all their computers, iPods, iPhones in China. Many people see that as a problem, and they say it's not patriotic. But the truth is that for a few years now, Apple employees are the most profitable employees in the world. In the world. An average Apple employee in the United States, and there are quite a few of them here, about 40,000 of them, generates for the company $400,000 per year. Of that, only about $100,000 or so on average is the salary. But that's how much they generate for the company. It's a huge amount of money, and that's why Apple is so profitable. Now, before that, it was, by the way, the Merrill Lynch, the financial guys, the banks. Before that, it was the oil companies. Before that, it was manufacturing, actually, that were the most profitable types of businesses or types of employees. So today, it's Apple, it's the IT guys. Now, think about it. They can generate so much money, and it's 40,000 people. It's no small organization, because they outsource everything that is not paying well, and they keep only the jobs that are very profitable. Designers, marketing specialists, financial specialists, logistics experts, all that kind of stuff. Wouldn't it be nice if America had jobs like that and more jobs like that, like Apple, like Nike? They also outsource the production but make all the stuff. Sure, yeah, let China make that stuff. That stuff is not generating a lot of profit. That stuff is dangerous. That stuff is sometimes stinky and polluting. So why not outsource that stuff? I mean, shouldn't you be worried about that? I mean, if anyone, China should be worried about that, because you keep the best jobs here. You outsource what's economically doesn't make much sense, environmentally doesn't make much sense. So it's almost, I mean, I don't know, is it evil? Is it, I don't know, saint? Think about that. So do you want more companies like Apple, or do you want more companies where people stand on the assembly line and do the same operation all day long? Tricky world. Now, so how come do people say we hear so much about the negatives of job outsourcing and so little about the positives of job outsourcing? Well, my background is actually more in industrial psychology, and so I kind of know a little bit about that. Well, studies show again and again, they even showed that with monkeys and even in one study with insects, that we humans, as well as other living things on this planet, somehow through the course of the evolution developed this propensity to be much more worried about losses than about gains. People would do much more. They will take higher risks. They will do more stupid things. They will actually do more stuff to prevent losses than to incur gains. So people, when you ask them, what would you do to prevent losing $1,000, $1,000 being stolen from you or lost in some other way, people do whatever it takes to keep that what they have. But at the same time, they wouldn't work as much. In fact, much less they would work in order to gain an extra $1,000. So economically, it's the same amount. But somehow losses loom much larger for us than gains. So as a result, it's very likely that you would see something like this. Very likely that you would see a person with a banner that says NAFTA kills jobs, the trade agreement between Canada, Mexico, and the United States that presumably caused a lot of job outsourcing to Mexico. And if the guy walks with NAFTA kills jobs or EU kills jobs or whatever region you happen to live in, it would be kind of normal. You see protests for that all the time, and here are some from the United States. But it wouldn't be likely to see a guy with a banner that says, I saved $5,000 on my Mexican-made Chevy Silverado car or truck. Same amount of job, equal important economic effect. You would think that people would be more vocal about that. But try to walk with a banner like that, you probably will be beaten up. And so that's how it works. That's what we seem to be more concerned about, even though economically the two are kind of excluding one another, right? Now, a big question then becomes, so is job outsourcing always good? Should we always welcome imports? Should we never protect our own companies? The answer is generally yes, but there are always exceptions, and here are some of the exceptions. Studies show or suggest that it's a good idea to impose some sort of protectionist measures, import tariffs, for example, on products that are what we call the infant industries. So there is a new industry sprouting in your country, like, I don't know, the solar panels or maybe some sort of electronics. And if another country happens to have better technology and already is established, if you allow free competition, chances are your own industry will never take off, right? Your own industry will never be strong enough to compete. So some believe that it may not be a bad idea to provide some sort of protection for a while until your industry gets strong enough. And when it gets strong enough, then you remove the restrictions on trade. And when they're strong enough to compete in the wild, you allow them to do so. Just like, children. We protect our children for what, like 18, 20 years of their life until they get strong enough, and then we just let them go and compete in the wild. Same thing if you have industries that are going through restructuring. Like, for example, in 2008, Chrysler and General Motors filed for bankruptcy and had to go through restructuring, and Ford was very close to that as well. And so many believe that at that time it would have been justified to impose some import tariffs on foreign-made cars so that the local car manufacturers have some time to breathe, restructure, and get stronger and then compete again. No, it's not a good idea to allow your children to outsource homework to India, because, again, the whole purpose of homework is, to learn. Though I don't know. I mean, frankly, if my kid found a way to outsource his homework to India, I don't know. I mean, yes, that probably wouldn't help him to become the next big engineer or inventor, but very likely it might help him become the next big entrepreneur. And I'm not even sure which practice would be more beneficial for his financial future, if you want to, put it that way. Now, remember in my previous lecture I quoted Paul Krugman, where he said that countries are more like people, not like companies. And especially when you talk about international trade. So it's very useful to think about countries as people in the context of job outsourcing and see if it's helpful or not. So I'm going to give you a few examples, but first let me show you a short video about Donald Trump and what he said about job outsourcing. Just a few words on countries are like people. In case you missed the last lecture. The point here is that many people think about countries as companies. And there is a fundamental difference here. Companies have external customers. So they normally compete for the money of some external customer. And so if company A gets, like for example, if Ford gets to sell a car to a customer, that's a loss for General Motors, because General Motors could have sold that car and made some money. But when we talk about countries, it's more like people. So if I buy something from you or, get a service from you, and in exchange I pay you or offer something in exchange to you, it's a mutually beneficial exchange. We don't have an external customer. You scratch my back, I scratch your back. You make my shirt, I paint your house. So it's a mutually beneficial, mutually agreed upon exchange of services or goods. And that's what happens with countries. So let's watch this video here, and then we will discuss, what it looks like.
On the top story tonight, Donald Trump for president looks like he might run. New Harris Internet poll out today says 10% of Americans would vote for Mr. Trump, and that ties him with Mitt Romney in the lead for the Republican sweepstakes. But is Donald Trump really up to the job? Here we go. Now, let's start with the big issue in the 212 presidential race, jobs. Why haven't jobs come back as fast as many people thought they should?
Because they're going to China. China is taking our jobs. They're making our product. and we have to do something about it, and we have to do something about it quickly. They are decimating our country just as OPEC is decimating our country with their oil prices.
But how can you compete with Chinese labor, which is much, much less than unionized American labor? I mean, what are you going to make a law that says you can't, American companies can't manufacture in China? You're going to make a law?
By getting China not to manipulate their currency. It's very tough for our companies to compete with Chinese companies because, very simply, they manipulate their currency. And when you manipulate a currency like they do, they're professionals at it.
Well, how are you going to do that, though? Chinese are going to say, we're going to do what we want, and we don't care what you say.
Something very simple, Bill. 25% tax on China unless they behave.
That sounds so simple, right? I mean, 25% tax on China unless they behave. Yeah, let's ban imports. That's going to create jobs in the United States. Is it really so simple? Let's compare the United States to a person, right? Let's compare the United States to John Smith. So what do we have here? We have the United States. It's a nation of educated people. Currently it is unemployed, or underemployed rather, right? So most people do have jobs, but many don't. Unemployment is close to 10%. Actually, it's a little lower now, but it was close to 10% just a few years ago. Previously, the United States was a leader in manufacturing, but most manufacturing jobs have been outsourced to Asia. And so the aspiration this nation has is to be the leader in the new age technologies, right? So the question is, what would you recommend to this country? Well, Donald Trump here recommended to impose import tariffs. He believes that the problems America is experiencing is because China is stealing its jobs. So we have to protect ourselves from other people doing our jobs so that we have more work to do, and that will make us richer. Make sense? Probably to you, probably no, but let's talk about it some more. So imagine John Smith, and he's just like the United States. John Smith is a freelance computer programmer. He's underemployed. He kind of wants to work 40 hours a week. He works only, let's say, 30, so he wants to work more, or 25 even. He would like to have a steady full-time job. His previous experience, he worked for a factory. He had a full-time job at a factory, but that job got outsourced somewhere else, so somebody else has that job. And his aspiration is to have a great job in this high-tech industry. What would you recommend to John Smith to do in order to have a good job? Well, chances are you would actually recommend something else to John Smith. If I ask that question to my students, they would say, well, I would recommend John Smith to maybe go back to school, to study more, so he has more skills and has a better job. And then I say, well, schools cost money. What would you recommend him to, where would you recommend that money comes from? They say, well, maybe get a loan, maybe, I don't know, work some odd jobs, or maybe, I don't know, borrow money, or get try to find some scholarship, or just borrow. I mean, it's okay to borrow money to go to school because later on it will pay off. Well, that makes sense too. Now, think about the advice we gave to the country and try to generalize this advice to John Smith. So people who say that America's problems are because jobs are going to China and America is not working enough are basically people who would say to John Smith, you know what, John? Your problem is that you are outsourcing too much of your work. Look at you. Somebody is giving you a haircut. Somebody is making you short. Somebody is preparing, I don't know, baking your bread. Somebody built your house. This is wrong, John. You are outsourcing too much. That's why you're underemployed. From tomorrow on, we're going to impose an import tax. And anytime you want to buy something made by somebody else, a cell phone, a shirt, food, whatever, you will have to pay 10 times as much. That will make you work more. And sure enough, if you do that, John will have to make everything by himself. He will have to paint his house. He will have to make his own clothing. He will have to make, I don't know, grow wheat and make his own bread. He will probably have to repair his car. That will definitely make him employed. That will definitely make him very busy. But the question is, will that make him better off? I don't think so. I don't think he will be better off economically. So how come this is what you recommend to the people, to the country? How come this is what you recommend him? you should probably recommend the country the same thing. Yes, I mean, try to tighten your belt, try to train, try to work harder so that you're better than everybody else, because otherwise you will not survive by simply shutting yourself from the rest of the world. I mean, that's not a very, viable strategy.
Sam's Club is drumming up business in the southern Chinese city of Guangzhou. This store opening marks the 173rd in China for parent company Walmart in just 13 years. Enthusiasm for spending money here is pulling this U.S. company and many more through the global recession. It's American Products Day. The store's 10,000 customers are celebrating, snapping up U.S. brands from vitamins to laundry detergent. Clearly, capitalism's a hit in communist China. Older generations still save half their paychecks, but that trend's reversing as a nation of young shopaholics is born. Salaries for young urban Chinese have almost tripled in less than a decade, from $858 to $2,300 a month. But people in their 20s and 30s save next to nothing. Instead, they're on a spending spree. The best indicator? The number of credit cards is exploding, from 13 million cards in 2005 to 180 million now. American businesses are riding high on the buying boom, thanks to people like Zhao Mengyao. She drives a Buick, chats on an iPhone, eats at McDonald's, and wears Nike. Brands are really important to me, and then I look at the price tag, she explains.
It seems that every major American company is digging its way into China. Caterpillar's had a bumpy ride because of the U.S. recession, but in China, its revenues have grown from $700,000 in 2005 to $2.6 billion this year.
The NBA's 30,000 Chinese retail spots are selling 60% more merchandise this year than last.
Nike entered China early back in 1980, and now it's the country's #1 sports brand. Revenues went up 22% in China this year, in comparison to just 2% in the U.S.
KFC and Pizza Hut are also feeding Chinese appetites faster than ever before. They're opening up 1 or 2 restaurants a day in China.
We think this is the best growth opportunity in the 21st century and maybe even beyond.
But perhaps no one's as thankful for China's big spenders as General Motors. The company faced bankruptcy earlier this year in the U.S., but it's never been hotter here, where first-time drivers are still excited to get behind the wheel of a brand-new American car. Still, experts caution it's just as hard for U.S. companies to succeed in China as it is back home.
If you are ready to operate in an environment that is chaotic, that is brutal, but that has real opportunity, that's when you should come over here. But don't come over here with candy corn dreams about some beautiful pot of gold that awaits you here.
Getting that pot of gold requires work. But American companies that haven't expanded to China may regret missing out on the great Chinese shopping spree. Celia Hatton, CBS News, Beijing.
So is job outsourcing always good? Well, again, you have to look at the economics. Sometimes job outsourcing happens for other reasons. For example, many companies go to China not because it's cheaper to make in China from the labor cost perspective, but because, it's cheaper to break the law. For $1 million bribe, you can solve any problem, and many people or companies seem to prefer that way. You can dump whatever you want in the atmosphere or in the river, and you couldn't do that in, for example, the EU or in the United States. And if that's the reason, I'd say that's a bad thing. I mean, it may be good for the company, it may even be good for the country that lost one of those polluters, but it's not good for the planet. So for that reason, yeah, probably not good. Economically, if it makes sense economically, cheaper labor or higher productivity, sure. But for breaking the law, sometimes that's not a good idea. Now, so how come people then or politicians often make wrong choices? The problem is that politicians are normally elected for a short period of time, like 4 years or so. And yes, it would be a good idea to invest a lot of money or resources in training people, building up education. But the problem is that you wouldn't see the results of that labor for a long time, probably for 10, 20 years. And politicians don't think in those terms. They want to fix the problems now. And fixing the problems now sometimes does involve like banning imports, because that will preserve a factory in your town where you got elected. And while it's bad for the economy as a whole, it's good for that small group of people who elected you for a short period of time. And so that's what you often do, and that's sometimes what happens, and that's why we still have import tariffs and all kinds of other policies that are not very good for the country. Sometimes, though, it kind of doesn't make sense at all. Like, for example, I took this picture at my gym. So the dumbbell, like the simplest heavy product made in China, seems like you could have made that stuff here. It's not like it's made manually. It's probably, just stamped automatically. So go figure. Anyway, this is what you need to know on the exam. Thank you for your attention, and I'll see you in the next lecture.